So this is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to title it, "The Romans Are Right About the Jews, and the Jews Are Right About the Romans." Or the Germans are telling the truth about the Jews, and the Jews are telling the truth about the Germans. Now, my Jew hat. Bam. So, this is an interesting thing because it does a much greater timeline analysis and multiple levels and layers of analysis on overlap timelines. Where to begin? Rome and Judea. A lot of people don't draw that connection across the span of almost 2,000 years between the destruction of Judea and the foundation of modern-day Israel, between the Roman destruction of the temple and the Holocaust in Germany. The beginning of the diaspora, supposedly the end of the diaspora. Yet a lot of Jews remain outside of Yisrael, of Klal Yisrael. And I wonder why. It's not like October 7th was a good example as why it was safer in Europe until all these Muslims came to Europe. And Africans, etc. Imagine that. Whole different topic. So, Rome's side of the story, and this is what's fun, because this is what I mean by multiple levels of analysis. So to get to that point, there's more onto what got me to consume this data and contrast it and analyze it. It started with, I guess you could say, cluster grouping. For those of you who don't know, cluster grouping is when you group things into clusters and then chart them in factor analysis, data analysis, things like that. Like Christians could be a cluster, whites, ethnicity, religion, different clusters, ideologies versus genetics, nature, nurture, whatever. Culturally transmitted traits and genetically transmitted traits, etc., etc., etc. Cluster grouping. So when I was in Seattle, this is the timeline that overlaps the timeline that overlaps the timeline. I eventually began to realize that my cultural environment was bad for me. The cultural atmosphere was anti-monogamous, anti-sobriety, and punished abstinence from drugs and alcohol, etc. It they deprive you of friendship, they ostracize you for going sober, etc. Excuse me one second, my brain is ready. So I developed these theories that the problem was white liberals, and therefore whites without Christianity are a hypersexualized hookup culture of drug abuse and addiction. Therefore, if I move to red states or return to Christianity, right, then I would find a state within a state of morality within a state of immorality. Dismorality. That Jews weren't even a thing on my mind. Neither was Judaism. But eventually, in this search, I ended up on the East Coast because family, another cluster, my race as well as my immediate family, and the government composed of brown people like me, all failed, as well as white secular government in Seattle, etc. There's just more cluster groups, more cluster identification labels. I ended up on the East Coast in a sailboat, abandoned and neglected, and nobody gives a shit about me, right? And I ended up in Annapolis, and that was the beginning of my anti-Semitism. I was living on a junk sailboat. It was like, I got it for $250. It was abandoned, Columbia 26. And I ended up on anchor in Annapolis and in Anchorage. And I did overstay the 30-day limit and all that stuff, and it did seem kind of like a waterway, but legally I was in the right, so the police didn't kick me out. The water police were also very corrupt. They fired the last harbor master for taking bribes. It became obvious that money was the law because there was this guy named Rod Jabin who owned Bert Jabin's yacht yard, and that guy, a woman told me that he hit her with his car, and she's crippled for life, and he got away with it because he owns the law with his money. Millions and millions of dollars go through that yard every single day. So if he's not making money off you, he doesn't want to see you. And here I was anchoring for free in front of his marina that he charges a lot to, dock at. His lawyer is a Jewish lawyer from New York named Josh Glickman. a federal litigator who, back when I Googled it, had like a 98% success rate, like winning rate. Yeah, so Jews are very smart. Intelligence and morality, two different things. So he used to bring his boat next to mine, and him and his party guests, right? He would go get drunk on the yacht every weekend. He had like a 60-foot yacht. The Southern Accent, I think is what it was called. And they would cuss me out and spit at me and, oh, fuck you. They called me a channel squatter. It was a nightmare. I fucking hated it. And so that's what sparked that thought of, oh, dude, this is what Hitler went through? Hitler gassed people like this? I wish it would. I even told him, I think, I wish it would have been 6,000,001. And I guarantee even Jews watching this, when they hear, oh, Jewish lawyer from New York, in their heart of hearts, they're like, oh, yeah, no, I understand. You don't get to be a successful lawyer by being nice. If anything, one of my vulnerabilities, which was told to me by a guy in Seattle, was that I'm too nice. And that's why people take advantage of me and fuck me over. Because I was raised by Spanish Catholic parents, right? No, my mom anyway. Anyway, but after Josh Glickman, that sort of got me into like BitChute and Gab and sort of far right sites. And here's where the timeline analysis, layers of analysis occurs. Is I started watching videos, and one was the Roman side of the story of Judean conquest. And their side of the story is that Jews had infiltrated Rome and were committing usury from within the empire. And at the time of the destruction of the temple, there was more gold hoarded in the temple of Jerusalem than there was in circulation in the entire Roman Empire. And it was Roman gold that was hoarded in the Jewish temple through usury, etc. Now this makes complete sense. If Jews have a greater intelligence, they're going to be better at math, they're going to be better at money, they're going to be better at taking money away from people with less intelligence. Master manipulators, right? So yeah, just from an objective perspective, that explanation does fit, but it's a little vague and also possibly wrong. So, but then I learned about the Arch of Titus, with the Romans carrying that giant golden menorah and stuff, taking their gold back. Another reason that fits is because that seems to be happening today and many other times throughout history in the United States. I saw another video where this Ashkenazi Jew in French Canada, in Quebec, although now he was near the Niagara Falls area at one point, he talked about the Jews in Russia. And he said Jews would infiltrate nations, governments, banks, and media, and cause a nation to go to war with itself by manipulating politicians. Back then it was the noblemen in the Russian monarchy. The upper class against the lower class was the war. They would manipulate politicians against the interests of the people. Simultaneously, they would fund and incite a revolt from the lower class against the upper echelons. The nation goes to war with itself, funded by its own money. Now, this only attributes the collapse of empires to Jews, but they're also at the core of the rise of empires. Fractional banking, which, if I'm to believe these anti-Semitic websites, was Jewish. Oliver Cromwell's revolution was Jews getting back into England after getting expelled. The London Quarter is the banking quarter, and fractional banking made the American empire happen, right? The whole British-American thing was fractional banking. It wouldn't have been possible otherwise. If you don't know what fractional banking is, look it up. Educate yourselves. So the Jewish side of the story... and that same thing happened in the United States with Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all that stuff, politicians legalizing marijuana, defunding the police, things like that. Literally, the same thing happened, that explanation fit for Russia with America 2019-2020. I digress. The Jewish side of the story is that Rome was anti-Semitic, right? And was a destructive war machine with empire expansionism. Now that also fits. Rome did the same thing to Judea it did to Greece, Carthage, London, etc., etc., etc. So both sides are lying and telling the truth. Just like any other war, just like World War II. Yet in World War II, the Soviets will say that they did most of the fighting and therefore they won the war. Americans say, no, we did most of the fighting. We saved the Jews from the Nazis. World War II wasn't about the Jews and the Nazis. It was about Hitler invading Poland and a whole bunch. It was basically Jews orchestrating a global war to regain ancient Judea as modern-day Israel after 2,000 years, which Native Americans are never going to get America back. This is not a moral condemnation, but Soviets would not have won if not for American funding, which Warburg, who Daddy Warbucks was, symbolizing in cartoon, Warburg pretty much owned the American Congress and got them to financially fund Stalin and the Red Army, which allowed them to do more on the Eastern Front coming into Berlin than America did on the Western Front coming across the Atlantic. There's a whole lot of factors. That's very ambiguous statement, I know, but accurate nonetheless. So, while I'm learning all this stuff and contrasting what the two sides of the story have in common versus what they have different, I left the sailboat, quit drinking again. Thank God this time for good, Baruch Hashem. And I ended up back in Albuquerque where the liberal thing was going on really hardcore, which is hilarious to me. Sorry, I got something weird on my wrist. Yeah. Because, we'll just take Walmart as one example, right? Walmart coddled so much for blacks. They gave them millions of dollars, and it's this weird dynamic of the insinuation of racism as a form of behavioral control. Behavior modification. Just like slut shaming. It's a form of manipulation to modify behavior. Oh no, I'm not popular on the internet. I better modify my behavior. Oh no, I don't want to be called a racist. I remember when that guy in the black guy in the Academy of Art University was like, support like Black Lives Matter or you's a racist. Right, give me your money or you're a racist? And I simply responded, well, I guess I'm a racist because you're not getting a penny from me. I'm not going to support black artists just because you're telling me, oh, if you don't do it, you're real. Oh, no, not a racist. Here's a bunch of money. Manipulation successful. The funny thing is it actually worked on a lot of morons who consider themselves to be intellectually superior to people who they call racist, but didn't fall for that scam. Anyway, Walmart gave millions upon millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter, put in anti-white discrimination policies to hire a lot of blacks. I guarantee if they publish honest reports without a manipulation of data and statistics, blacks are their number one shoplifting demographic. Not even just recently, but since the beginning of the store. Like, in the last 50 years, the Walton family has undoubtedly lost so much money to that one demographic over a lot of the others. Which is saying a lot, because Hispanics, oh yeah, we steal from Walmart. Like a lot. So it's saying a lot, right? They gave them millions and millions of dollars, and what did blacks do out of gratitude? Shoplifted even more. To where Walmart had to close down in places in Chicago, places in, I think Harlem even, etc. But I moved back to New Mexico with that sort of wokeness going on, and it was hilarious to watch them suffer from their own wokeness and then blame the Nazis. This only made me like the Nazis even more, right? If you don't like trans kids, you're a Nazi. Oh no, not a Nazi! I better like the trans kids! Manipulation. Psychological manipulation. That's all that is. Yeah, so then I'm back in New Mexico, and I'm looking for a place to live where nobody smokes marijuana. I finally found one. It was a Taekwondo studio, which was in a bad part of town, but the whole city is a bad part of town. Thanks, wokeness, marijuana, porn, etc. Anyway, this guy, like, it was great for months. Nobody at least smoked marijuana in the studio building. And then this guy moved in and claimed it was medicinal. He was clearly lying. And he was Jewish. Like, he was straight up, I'm Jewish, is what he told me, as if that was some sort of defense. Because I told him, your marijuana is setting off my schizophrenia. It's giving me homicidal thoughts about you, suicidal thoughts, just bad things. He didn't say, oh, I'm sorry, or I apologize, or I'll change my behavior. No, he just said, I'm Jewish. I'm one of the Spanish converso Jews from the conquistador ship descendants. I'm just like, that doesn't explain. And so that increased my anti-Semitism even more. Real life experiences with Jews being assholes. But at the same time, the Goyim, the Gentiles, the people like me, were just the same, if not worse. It's actually disappointing to see that Jews are human just like everybody else. Like, I had hoped they were actually better than that. Anyway, while that was going on, I began to analyze a lot of World War II history. And that was really funny in itself, because it seems to me that so many Jews are so liberal, they're so oversensitive emotionally, that they can't just... That's one thing that I liked about the Nazis, is masculinity. It takes testosterone, it takes bravery to just be direct honesty, right? To be directly honest, to engage in direct honesty. And Jews seem to not be okay with that. They seem to be very, scared off by direct honesty. It's very strange, because at the same time, Israelis are known for just being blunt and shooting straight. But I think one of the reasons I got kicked out wasn't just setting off the independent thought alarm, but for this blunt directness. And I don't know if that's true or not. I've tried to communicate with them, and they just stopped communicating. Which is another fun thing, right? So if you think it's a Jewish conspiracy that Jews run the internet, all you have to do to communicate with a Jew, because I've been doing this for years now, is do a video like this, post it anywhere on the internet, and Jews will get the message. Like in network. It's weird. Those Citizen Cafe hasn't responded back to me, but somehow they know that I've spent all my money, so I can't renew for next course because they didn't respond back to me. Like, the information content in these videos has already gotten back to them. But Jews don't run the internet, you know. And I've done that for a while. Instagram, I would do, tests, essentially experiments, where I'd put in a message and see if it popped out on the other side, sort of thing. Always did. Jews always get the message. Well, right, yeah. And the other thing is, so then I began to look at World War II history, and the Nazis were full of shit, but also right on a few things. So Magnus Hirschfeld was Jewish, and for his transgender clinic, he was a homosexual and a eugenicist. He was pushing transgenderism to lower the birth rate. Jews like Walter Berkmeyer, Oda Oldberg, Emil Maurice were against pornography, perversion, transgenderism, etc. So this made it obvious to me that not all Jews are pro-gay, pro-LGBT, pro-trans kids, pro-Black Lives Matter, etc., etc., etc. Especially now that blacks are yet again doing the scorpion and the frog with the Jews, right? Black Lives Matter is supporting the Palestinian movement, chanting for the death of Israel and Israelis and all that stuff. Even though Israelis, like Walmart, did so much to support the blacks. Being stabbed in the back, yeah. So it's not so simple. It's good to not to succumb to simplex thinking of complex issues. But one of the way that I argue with the anti-Semites, the neo-Nazis on the internet, is they'll cite things like Europa the Last Battle and The Greatest Story Never Told, which paint Hitler in a positive light. And so my question to them, right, because you apply critical thinking to these, which I don't know why Jews don't do this. It's like they're scared of even watching this content. It's really easy to see through the lies. Just you watch it and then you're like, well, wait a minute. Why would the final solution be deportation if they've been deported from 109 countries and doing fine? Deportation isn't a final solution. You're clearly lying. The final solution was genocide. Theodor Herzl's final solution was mass migration to, the Jewish state, to Israel, the Middle East, British Mandate Palestine. But that was only for poor Jews. I mean, Avram Stern and the Irgun started committing terrorism to scare Jews in Europe to leave Europe and move back to the Middle East. Why would they want to move back to the Middle East? October 7th. You don't need the Iron Dome in Europe. The Jews are getting murdered by Muslim and African, black immigrants in the United States and Europe, etc. But it's still safer for Jews, or at least it was, than in the Middle East, which is insane. So how did Israel get that way? The same exact thing. Liberal Jews. They say it's about Arab rights, human rights, gay rights. Those are just like the Liberal Party in the United States. They mask their greed with altruism. It's really about power and control. They'd rather destroy Israel than lose control of it, so they created a bunch of internal conflict, which created a weakened state, which created an opportunity for Israel's enemies to attack. Because the left incited riots, called Netanyahu Hitler, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, getting ahead of ourselves. So, in The Greatest Story Never Told, they claim that Hitler's final solution was deportation to Siberia. That was actually Stalin's idea. So Dennis Wise took Stalin's idea, lied, and attributed it to Hitler. It was the Oblast Zone. You can look it up. The Autonomous Zone, just like Chaz in Seattle. It was a place in Siberia. So I can't go back to simply being a Gab Nazi. It's regression. I can't go back. But I'm running out of time and I do want to eat. So just one last thing. I got this video, and this was interesting to me because someone said, oh yeah, this is the Jews running the world, right? There's this weird... I got the camera on a low pixelated setting. But this weird video that has like these golden images and, Hebrew... But critical thinking, the book is bound in English fashion. It's not a Torah scroll. And the last page is like a Baphomet type thing. With angel wings for some reason. I could probably translate the Hebrew on my own if I dedicated the time to it, but I am busy with school. That is another thing about not learning Hebrew anymore. And I don't want to give up on Judaism. Jews are clearly smarter than, the Nazis. That's why they won the war. That's how they got Israel back out of World War II. That's why they weren't genocided completely, etc. The IQ, they outcompeted their enemies up here. But I digress. Oh, yeah. But when I look at that, right, there is something that most people don't realize. When Christians accuse Jews of being subversive, they are being subversive more so. It's only bad when the Jews do it. For example, in Isaiah, I can't remember which passage it is, but there is a passage that King James translates to like the goat and the screech owl and the vultures. The screech owl is Lilith, who was like Adam's first wife, according to the Talmud, right? This sort of female demon in Jewish demonology. But the goat man is also a demon. It's like a goat demon. And I'm not sure, I think in the ancient Hebrew, but also in the modern Hebrew, the Tanakh, they call it the satir. I'm pretty sure satir is a Greek word. Probably Koine Greek, ancient Koine Greek, for goat man. Pan, the pagan model, right? If you read Job, in the Tanakh, the Jewish translation, it cites Orion and Pleiades and all these pagan Greek myths. So, while this golden book with the golden Hebrew letters looks, ooh, yeah, the Jews are running the world, why is it bound in English fashion instead of being a scroll? Jews didn't start binding books with book covers. That was, I'm pretty sure, likely a European invention, but not a Semitic advance. I'm pretty sure they just did scrolls in ancient Judea. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. I forget where I was going with all this. Anyway, I should eat. Oh, right, yeah. Now that I'm not doing the Hebrew and all that, I'm getting a lot more done. I've finished Chapter 7 of the American Psychological Association Publication Manual. I'm actually ahead, whereas when I was doing the Hebrew, I was literally setting time aside for Hebrew as a higher priority, even than a lot of school. No, I'm actually ahead. And violin is actually going perfectly with this, so it looks like Western thought is winning. Not even by my own choice, but because the Israelis kicked me out of the Hebrew group.